The notification that my father had finally ceased to be a biological problem arrived at 10:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the time precisely because I was in the middle of calibrating the deviation metrics for our batch, 404 sterile injectables, and I hate interruptions. My phone buzzed against the stainless steel surface of the clean room staging area, a violation of protocol, strictly speaking. But I'm the one who writes the protocols, so I grant myself certain variances. The text was from my aunt. It was efficient, much like the way I run my department. He's gone, massive coronary. Coroner is here, call when you can. I didn't cry. Crying introduces particulate matter into the environment, and my mascara isn't ISO 9001 compliant. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow thud in my chest, like a centrifuge unbalanced by a single gram. My father and I hadn't spoken in 6 years. He was a man who viewed sobriety as a suggestion and responsibility as a disease, but biology is a binding contract. He was dead. I was the next of kin. The paperwork was going to be a nightmare. Before I tell you how I dismantled a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical company using nothing but a silent stare and a federal statute, do me a quick favor. If you've ever had a boss who thought synergy was a substitute for competence, go ahead and hit subscribe button and tap the like. It fuels the algorithm and frankly, it keeps me from driving my car into a retention pond. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of isopropyl alcohol and recycled air, the smell of safety. I walked out of the sterile core, stripped off my Tyvek suit with practiced efficiency, and marched straight to the elevators. I needed to file for FMLA. Indiana law is clear, federal law is clearer, and I am nothing if not a creature of statutes. The executive floor was different. Down in production, we dealt with facts. Up here on the fourth floor, they dealt in fiction. The air smelled of expensive espresso and desperation. I knocked on the glass door of the new VP of operations. Chad. Chad was 32, had a degree in business optimization from a college that probably advertises on podcasts, and had been hired 6 weeks ago to disrupt our workflow. He wore a Patagonia vest indoors and had the kind of teeth that looked like they were purchased, not grown. He was currently sitting on a yoga ball behind a mahogany desk, typing on a laptop with stickers that said things like hustle and grind. Holly, the hallster, Chad said, not looking up. What's the haps? Getting that yield up, or are you here to tell me the FDA is grumpy again? My father died an hour ago, Chad, I said. My voice was flat. I don't do tremolo. Chad stopped typing. He looked up, blinked twice, and then arranged his face into a mask of performative sympathy he'd likely learned from a YouTube tutorial on empathy. Oh, wow, bummer. Truly, sending vibes. I need to initiate FMLA leave immediately, I said, placing the printed form on his desk. I'll need 3 days for the funeral arrangements and estate settlement. The probate courts in the state are slow, and his house is a biohazard. Chad picked up the paper as if it were a dirty tissue. He frowned, his eyebrows knitting together in a way that suggested deep, painful cognition. 3 days, he asked. Right now, Holly, look, I get it. It's a disruption. But we're pivoting to the Q3 rapid release cycle. We've got that $12 million distribution run for the West Coast distributors launching on Friday. The optics of the lead QA officer vanishing? Not great. My father is dead, I repeated, slower this time, as if explaining a contamination risk to a toddler. It's not a pivot, it's a funeral. Chad sighed, leaning back on his yoga ball, the rubber squeaking ominously under his khakis. See, this is what I mean about legacy mindsets. You're thinking about personal downtime. I'm thinking about the ecosystem. We're a family here, Holly, and families don't abandon the ship just because of external variables. I felt a vein in my temple pulse. Federal Medical Leave Act. It's not a request, Chad, it's a notification. I am the named qualified person on our license. I am telling you I will be unavailable. He smirked. It was a wet, condescending smirk that made me want to sanitize his face with a blowtorch. Qualified person. Right, the signature lady. Look, take the days if you have to, but just know this kind of fragility, it doesn't scream leadership material to me. We need rock stars here, Holly, not people who crumble. I'll see you Monday, I said, turning on my heel. Make sure you check your email, he called after me. He might need you to hop on a Zoom if the auditors sniff around. I walked to the elevator, my hands shaking, not from grief, but from the sheer, unadulterated rage of being called fragile by a man whose hardest life struggle was likely slow Wi-Fi at a Starbucks. I didn't know it then, but that smirk was the most expensive facial expression Chad would ever make. He thought he was managing a burned-out middle-aged woman. He didn't realize he was poking a sleeping tiger with a compliance violation. I went to my desk, packed my laptop, and looked at the framed certificate on my wall, named qualified person. In the pharmaceutical world, that title isn't just a job. It's a legal shield. It means I am personally, criminally liable if a bad pill leaves that building. It also means that without my physical presence or a formally designated deputy, which Chad had refused to hire because of budget efficiency, the plant is legally just a very expensive warehouse. He didn't know that. He thought I was just paperwork. As I drove out of the parking lot, the Indiana sky was the color of a bruised lung. I lit a cigarette, my one secret vice, the one thing that wasn't FDA approved, and inhaled. The smoke burned, grounding me. Fragile, I whispered to the empty car. I hoped Chad enjoyed the optics of what was coming, because he was about to learn that in my world, we don't just have problems. We have corrective and preventive actions. And he was the deviation. The funeral was exactly as I expected. Cheap, rainy, and attended by people who looked like they were auditioning for a depressing documentary about the Rust Belt. My father had alienated anyone with a credit score over 600, so the pews were filled with his drinking buddies, men with leathery skin and coughs that sounded like gravel in a blender. I stood by the grave in my black trench coat, watching the casket descend. It was a budget model, pressed wood veneer that would dissolve in the damp state earth within a decade. I felt nothing but a vague sense of procedural completion. Task closed. File archived. My phone had been buzzing incessantly for 3 days. 37 missed calls from the plant, 14 emails marked urgent with varying amounts of exclamation points. I didn't answer a single one. FMLA means leave. Leave means I am not working. If the plant was burning down, they could call 911. If the FDA was auditing, well, they should have thought about that before the VP told me to prioritize optics over mourning. I drove back to Indiana on Sunday night, exhausted, smelling of stale church basements and wet wool. I showed up at the facility at 7:45 a.m. on Monday, ready to get back to the sterile comfort of my spreadsheets. I swiped my badge at the employee turnstile. Beep. Access denied. I frowned. Must be a glitch. The system was notoriously finicky when it rained. I swiped again. Beep. Access denied. Contact security. A heavy feeling settled in my gut, cold and sharp. I looked up to see Gary, the head of site security, walking toward the glass doors. Gary and I went back 10 years. We exchanged Christmas cards. He looked at the floor, then at his shoes, then anywhere but my eyes. He opened the door manually but blocked the entrance with his body. I'm sorry, Holly. My codes don't work for you anymore. They locked you out of the mainframe at midnight. Locked me out? I adjusted my glasses. Gary, I'm the director of quality assurance. I have a batch release pending. What is going on? You need to go to the loading dock. Holly, Chad left a box. A box. The universal corporate symbol for you have ceased to matter. I walked around the perimeter of the building to the loading dock. It was gray and drizzling again. There, sitting on a wooden pallet usually reserved for rejected raw materials, was a cardboard banker's box. Chad was standing there, flanked by the HR representative, a woman named Kayla who looked like she was about to vomit. Chad, however, looked energized. He was holding a kale smoothie. Holly, he shouted over the hum of the idling trucks. Welcome back, or well, goodbye, I guess. I walked up to the pallet, my stapler, my frame degree, a half-dead succulent, and a manila envelope. What is this, Chad? I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. We're making some structural changes, Chad said, sipping his green sludge. We did a deep dive on the metrics while you were away. Turns out your department is a bottleneck. Need agility? We need speed. And frankly, taking 3 days off right before a major launch, it showed a lack of commitment to the vision. We're exercising the will clause. You're firing me for attending my father's funeral. We're letting you go because of misalignment of values, he corrected, flashing those porcelain teeth. Plus, we found someone cheaper. I mean hungrier, a real go-getter, just out of college. He starts today. No bad habits, no legacy baggage. I stared at him. The sheer, monumental stupidity was breathtaking. It was like watching a toddler play with a live grenade. Chad, I said, and for the first time, a small, cold smile touched my lips. Does this go-getter have his certifications? He's got a degree in biomanagement. Chad beamed. He's a wizard with Python. Does he, I asked, have his federal registration as a named qualified person under 21 CFR Part 211? Chad waved a hand dismissively. That's just paperwork, Holly. We'll figure it out. Don't be bitter. It causes wrinkles. He turned to Kayla. Give her the severance check. 2 weeks. Generous, right? I took the envelope. I didn't look at the check. I looked at the building, the steel and glass monolith that housed millions of dollars of controlled substances. You're right, Chad, I said. Paperwork is just paperwork. Until it isn't. I picked up my box. It wasn't heavy. My dignity was intact, unlike the regulatory status of this facility, which had technically just expired the moment my employment was terminated. Good luck with the launch, I said. I turned and walked to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream. That's what amateurs do. Professionals, we check the statutes. As I sat in the driver's seat, the rain drumming on the roof, I didn't start the car immediately. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call my mom. I didn't call a recruiter. I called the number for the regional field office of the Food and Drug Administration. But I didn't speak to them yet. I just checked the contact hours. Then I drove home, opened a bottle of Pinot Noir, and prepared to watch the world burn. My apartment is like my life, minimalist, gray, and aggressively clean. I don't have throw pillows that say live, laugh, love. I have coasters that are geometrically aligned with the edge of the coffee table. I poured a glass of wine, a dry red that tasted like oak and vengeance, and opened my personal laptop. It's important to keep a personal backup. Corporate IT departments think they're gods because they can reset a password, but they always forget that quality officers are professional hoarders of documentation. We document to survive. I opened a folder titled Doomsday Protocols. Inside was a PDF copy of the facility's FDA establishment license. I scrolled to Section 4, subsection B. There it was, in unyielding Times New Roman font, named Qualified Person, QP, Holly Miller. License status: active only upon continuous employment and on-site oversight of the designated QP. The text might as well have been written in neon. It meant that the moment Chad deactivated my badge, he had inadvertently turned the entire manufacturing plant into an illegal operation. The FDA doesn't care about synergy. They care about accountability. If a batch of drugs goes out the door and kills someone, they need a specific human being to handcuff. For the last 5 years, that human was me. Now, it was nobody. And a pharmaceutical plant operating without a QP is like a commercial airliner flying without a pilot. It might glide for a while. Gravity is inevitable. I took a sip of wine. The rage I had felt in the parking lot was cooling into something harder, something useful. I wasn't just an ex-employee. I was a loose thread in a sweater, and Chad had just pulled me. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Law offices of Stoller and Finch, the receptionist answered. Put me through to David, I said. Tell him Holly Miller has a whistleblower claim that's going to pay for his boat. David came on the line 30 seconds later. Holly, I thought you were lifers over at Pharma Corp. Did you finally snap and poison the coffee? They fired me, David, while I was at my father's funeral, a low whistle on the other end. Ouch. Wrongful termination? Better, I said, hearing the click of my keys as I drafted an email to him. They fired the named QP 3 days before a $12 million distribution run. And David replaced me with an unregistered grad student. There was a silence on the line. A profound, reverent silence. Holly, David said, his voice dropping an octave. Are you telling me they are currently manufacturing controlled substances without a license holder on the premises? I'm telling you that as of 8 a.m. this morning, that building is effectively a meth lab with a 401k plan. Send me everything, David said. Do not talk to them. Not sign anything else. I'm going to draft a letter to the board, but... Wait, no, I interrupted. No letter to the board yet. Why? We can settle this for 6 figures by Friday. I looked at the rain streaking my window. I thought about Chad's smirk. I thought about the fragile comment. I thought about my dad's cheap casket and the way Chad had treated my grief as a productivity bottleneck. I don't want a settlement, David, I said softly. I want compliance. Holly, what are you planning? They have a major shipment going out Friday, the West Coast distribution. If we alert the board now, they'll pause, hire a temp QP, pay a fine, and sweep it under the rug. Chad keeps his job. The investors stay happy. And if we wait until they ship, I said, it becomes interstate trafficking of misbranded pharmaceuticals. It becomes a felony. Jesus, Holly. I'm just following the procedure, David. Step 1, identify the deviation. Step 2, allow the system to demonstrate failure. Step 3, corrective action. You're terrifying. I'm unemployed. I corrected. There's a difference. I hung up. Next, I logged into the FDA's industry portal. My credentials were still active because they were tied to my professional license, not the company email. I saw the dashboard. Status, compliant. Last login, 4 hours ago, by admin. Chad's team had logged in. Hadn't removed my name. They were ghostwriting my license. They were pretending I was still there to keep the green lights on. I took a screenshot. This wasn't just negligence anymore. This was fraud. I sat back, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. I wasn't a vindictive woman by nature. I returned my shopping carts. I paid my taxes early. I followed the rules. But Chad had broken the cardinal rule of the universe. He mistook kindness for weakness, and silence for submission. I finished my wine. It was going to be a long week. I needed to buy more popcorn. Tuesday and Wednesday passed with the agonizing slowness of a sterilization cycle. I didn't leave my apartment. I became a spider in the center of a digital web. I knew the rhythm of the plant better than I knew my own heartbeat. Tuesday, 2 p.m., raw material weighing. Wednesday, 9 a.m., compounding. Wednesday, 4 p.m., sterile fill. Every step required a signature. My signature, or legally the signature of someone I had explicitly authorized. Since I hadn't authorized anyone because Chad had fired me before I could even hand over my keys, every batch record they were generating was a confession. I needed eyes on the inside. I couldn't text my former team. IT would be monitoring their chats, looking for leaks. But the pharmaceutical industry in Indiana is small. Everyone sleeps with everyone, or at least drinks with them. I texted an old number. Extra pickles, no remorse. 20 minutes later, I got a reply. Diner on Route 4. 8 p.m. Bring cash. It was Marcus, a shift supervisor in packaging. He hated Chad almost as much as I did, mostly because Chad had tried to replace the breakroom coffee with nootropic mushroom tea. I sat in the back booth of the Greasy Spoon, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses like a discount celebrity. Marcus slid into the seat opposite me. He looked tired. He smelled like cardboard and adhesive. It's a shit show, Holly, he whispered, leaning over his milkshake. The new guy, the kid, he's running around with a clipboard looking like he's trying to solve a maze. He doesn't know the difference between a batch record and a love letter. Are they running the line? I asked, dipping a fry into ketchup. Full tilt. Chad's on the floor, high-fiving people. He's calling it velocity mode. They bypassed the QA hold step. My stomach tightened. Bypassing the QA hold was the industrial equivalent of driving blindfolded on a highway. How? The software won't let you proceed without a QP sign-off. Marcus looked around, then leaned in closer. Chad ordered IT to patch the code. They hard-coded an override, using a generic admin login to approve the steps. I almost laughed. It was so clumsy, so arrogant, so beautifully illegal. They weren't just forging a signature, they were hacking their own compliance software. The shipment? I asked. Trucks arrive Friday morning at 6 a.m. Loading Dock 4. Going straight to the McKesson hub in Chicago for West Coast distribution. Thanks, Marcus. I slid a $50 bill under the sugar dispenser. Buy the guys some real coffee. Holly, he said, grabbing my wrist, if this goes south, do we all lose our jobs if you keep your head down and document everything? No, the company will survive, the management won't. Just don't sign anything, Marcus. Lose your pen. He nodded and left. My next call was to Celeste. Celeste wasn't in pharma. She was an investigative journalist for a mid-sized business journal who had been trying to break a story on deregulation for years. She was sharp, hungry, and had a vocabulary that made sailors blush. Holly Miller, she answered on the first ring. To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you finally find the rat hair in the aspirin? Better, I said. I have a story about a tech bro VP who thinks FDA regulations are just suggestions for legacy companies. I'm listening. I can't go on record yet, I said, but I need you to have a draft ready for Friday morning. Title it something like Compliance Vulnerabilities. Keep it vague, just enough to make the investors nervous. Friday? What happens Friday? Friday, I said, is when the rubber meets the road, or rather when the federal marshal meets the loading dock. Your evil Celeste purred. I love it. I hung up. The trap was set. The cheese was in place. And Chad, the rat in the Patagonia vest, sprinting toward it with his mouth open. I went home and slept for 10 hours. It was the best sleep of my life. There's a specific kind of peace that comes from knowing you have done absolutely nothing wrong, and that the people who are currently digging their own graves with golden shovels. Thursday morning, the day before the shipment. I wasn't there, but I could see it. I could feel the panic vibrating through the limestone bedrock of Indiana. According to a panic text from a lab tech named Sarah, sent from the bathroom, presumably the atmosphere inside the plant had shifted from velocity mode to Titanic mode. The kid, Justin, is crying in the titration lab, the text read. He can't find the deviation logs. Chad is screaming about blockers. I took a sip of herbal tea and replied, follow the SOP. If you don't know, don't guess. Inside the facility, the reality was likely grim. You see, pharmaceutical manufacturing isn't just mixing powders. It's a chain of custody. Every gram of active ingredient must be accounted for. If you spill 5 grams, you don't just wipe it up. You write a report about why gravity defeated you. Justin, the hungry grad student, is likely discovering that biomanagement theory doesn't cover what to do when the humidity sensor in room 402 fails and threatens to turn $1 million of pills into paste. In a normal world, the named qualified person, me, would step in. I would assess the risk. I would quarantine the affected lot. I would sign off on the remediation. But Justin presumably asked Chad. And Chad presumably said, fix it in post. Around 2:00 p.m., my phone buzzed with an automated alert. I hadn't been removed from the emergency notification system yet. Another oversight by HR. Alert, critical system error. Batch record 404B integrity failure. I smiled. The software I had helped configure was fighting back. The system required a QP biometric scan to close the batch record. Justin's thumbprint wouldn't work. Chad's thumbprint wouldn't work. They were stuck. The pills were made, bottled, and boxed. But digitally, they didn't exist. They were ghosts in the machine. You cannot ship a ghost. I imagined Chad in the server room sweating through his vest. He would be yelling at the IT director, a weary man named Patel. Just bypass it, Chad would shout. We have to ship. The trucks are coming. It's hard-coded for safety, Patel would argue. I am the vice president of operations. Chad would scream. I authorized the override. And that was the moment. That was the crossover. If they had stopped there, called the FDA, and admitted they messed up, a fine, a warning letter, a public shaming, but Chad didn't stop. At 4:15 p.m., I received another notification. Alert, batch record 404B approved. User, admin override. My heart rate didn't even spike. I just took a screenshot. They had done it. They had forced the system to accept a batch without a qualified review. It had just certified that the drugs were safe, pure, and effective, based on the medical opinion of nobody. I forwarded the screenshot to David, my lawyer. Subject, the smoking gun. Body, they just pulled the trigger. Don't fire back until the trucks are loaded. I went to my kitchen and started making a lasagna. Cooking is chemistry. It requires patience, precision, and the right ingredients. Chad had the ingredients, but he lacked the patience. and tomorrow. He was going to find out that hustle culture is not a valid defense in federal court. Friday morning, 5 o'clock a.m., the sun hadn't risen yet. The world was a bruised purple. I drove to the cemetery before the traffic started. It was on the way to nothing, nestled behind a strip mall that had seen better decades. The dirt on my father's grave was still fresh, a mound of raw earth in a sea of manicured grass. No headstone yet, that takes weeks. Just a little plastic marker with his name and dates. Robert Miller, 1950-2024. I stood there looking at the plastic. My dad was a mess. He drank too much, smoked too much, and lied when the truth would have served him better. He was the chaotic variable in my controlled life. I had spent 40 years trying to be his opposite, clean, precise, regulated. You would have liked this, Dad, I said to the dirt. You always hated the suits. He would have. He would have laughed his wheezing laugh to see me, the dutiful daughter, about to light a match under a billion-dollar pile of corporate arrogance. I'm sorry I wasn't there when it happened, I whispered. And I'm sorry I let them treat your funeral like a scheduling conflict. That was the core of it. It wasn't just the law. It was the disrespect. Chad hadn't just violated 21 CFR Part 211. He had violated the basic human code that says death matters more than quarterly projections. He had looked at my grief and seen inefficiency. I placed a single white rose on the mound. It was cliché, but I like traditions. They offer structure. Sleep well, old man, I said. I got back in my car. It was 5:45 a.m. My phone pinged, a text from Marcus. Trucks are docking, loading starting now. Chad is popping champagne in the break room. It's disgusting. I took a deep breath. I opened my laptop, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and logged into the Department of Health and Human Services OIG hotline portal. I had the draft saved. Complaint type, gross misconduct/federal fraud. Facility, PharmaCorp Indiana plant. Nature of violation, manufacturing and distribution of controlled pharmaceuticals without a named qualified person. Falsification of batch records via unauthorized IT override. Impending interstate shipment of misbranded product. Attached were the files. 1. My termination letter dated Monday. 2. The FDA license showing my name active. 3. The screenshot of the admin override dated yesterday. 4. A photo Marcus had sent me of the pallets being loaded, timestamped 5:50 a.m. I hovered over the submit button. This was the nuclear option. Once I clicked this, there was no going back. The company would be raided. People would lose jobs. My reputation would be the woman who snitched. But then I remembered Chad's voice. We need rock stars here, Holly. Not people who crumble. I didn't crumble. I detonated. I clicked submit. A small green banner appeared. Thank you. Your report has been received. A case number has been assigned. I closed the laptop. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to the plant. Not to work, to watch. I drove to the diner across the street from the facility, the one with the big windows facing the main gate. I ordered coffee and eggs. I sat there, watching the sunrise glint off the chrome of the semi-trucks leaving the loading dock. One by one, they turned onto the highway, carrying millions of dollars of contraband. Run along, I whispered, blowing on my coffee. Go tell the world what you are. Now, we waited for the cavalry. By 10 o'clock a.m., the trucks were long gone. Chad was reportedly walking on air. He had sent a company-wide email which Sarah forwarded to me titled, Execution Excellence, How We Crushed Q3. It was full of emojis, rocket ships, flexing biceps. It made me want to sanitize my eyes, but the silence was about to break. At 10:15 a.m., Celeste published her article on the Midwest Business Journal website. Headline, Safety Second. Insiders allege regulatory gaps at major Indiana pharma player. It was a masterpiece of vague menace. It didn't name names yet. It just mentioned recent high-level terminations and concerns regarding licensure continuity. It was enough. My phone buzzed. It was David, my lawyer. Holly, the board just called an emergency meeting for 11:30. Investors are seeing the article. They're spooked. Is Chad invited? Chad is presenting. He's supposed to be taking a victory lap. Perfect. I knew exactly what was happening inside that conference room on the 4th floor. The mahogany table, the expensive water bottles, the nervous shuffling of papers. The CEO, a man named Sterling who had a tan that looked like stained wood, would be asking questions. Chad, what is this article? Chad, why is the stock down 2% since lunch? Chad, where is the QA director? And Chad, in his infinite arrogance, be spinning. He'd call it FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. He'd say it was a disgruntled ex-employee, me trying to sabotage the vision. He'd say the metrics speak for themselves. I sat in the diner watching the main gate. At 11 o'clock a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the security booth. It wasn't a limo. It was a government-issue Tahoe, then another, then a local police cruiser. My waitress refilled my coffee. Something going on over there, Han. Looks like a parade. Just a surprise inspection, I said, smiling over the rim of my cup. I checked the time. The board meeting was starting right now. Chad would be pulling up his PowerPoint slides. He'd be pointing to the revenue projections. He had no idea that the slide deck of his life was about to catch fire. I imagined the scene. Chad standing up, adjusting his vest. We disrupted the supply chain, he'd say. We trimmed the fat, he'd say. The black SUVs rolled through the gate. The security guard, Gary, didn't stop them. He stepped out of the booth and pointed toward the administration building. I saw the men get out, blue windbreakers, yellow letters, U.S., Marshal, FDA OSI, Office of Criminal Investigations. They didn't walk fast, they didn't run. They walked with the heavy, inevitable pace of consequences. I took a bite of my toast. It was dry. I didn't care. Here we go, I whispered. I wasn't in the room, but I know exactly what happened. I know because David was on a conference line with the legal department, and he narrated the play-by-play to me later over drinks. Chad was mid-sentence. He was explaining how removing legacy personnel had improved decision velocity. The double doors of the boardroom didn't just open. They were pushed open by a man who had zero interest in corporate synergy. Agent Miller, no relation. Thankfully, from the FDA Office of Criminal Investigations walked in, flanked by two U.S. Marshals. The room went silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a stock price dropping. Who are you? Sterling, the CEO, demanded, standing up. This is a private board meeting. Sit down, Agent Miller said. He didn't shout, he just projected. He walked to the head of the table and placed a red folder on the polished wood. I am Special Agent Miller with the FDA. This is a federal stop production order pursuant to 21 CFR Part 211. As of 11:42 a.m., this facility is under the control of the United States government. Chad laughed, a nervous, high-pitched giggle. Whoa, okay, is this a prank? Did the sales team hire a stripper? Agent Miller turned to look at Chad. He looked at the Patagonia vest. He looked at the teeth. He looked at him like he was a stain on a Petri dish. Are you Chad Kensington? VP of Operations, Chad said, puffing his chest out slightly, though his voice wavered. Mr. Kensington, the agent said, did you authorize the release of Lot 404B via an administrative override at 4:15 p.m. yesterday? Aye. We. It was a glitch. We fixed it. Did you do so without the signature or presence of a named qualified person? Holly left. She abandoned her post. Chad shouted, pointing at the empty air. We had to ship. The business needs. The law requires, the agent interrupted, his voice like a hammer, a qualified person. By shipping that product, you committed interstate fraud. We have seized the trucks in Chicago. They never made it to the distributors. The CEO turned slowly to look at Chad. His face was gray. You shipped, Sterling whispered. Without a QP sign-off, you told me it was compliant. It's just paperwork. Chad screamed, his composure finally shattering. It's just a stupid signature. The pills are fine. The pills, the agent said, are evidence. He signaled to the marshals. Chad Kensington, please stand up and place your hands behind your back. What? No, no, Chad scrambled back, knocking over his yoga ball. It bounced comically across the room. You can't arrest me. I'm disrupting the industry. You're certainly disrupting something, the marshal said, snapping the cuffs on. The CEO slumped into his chair, head in his hands. The investors on the Zoom screen were frantically disconnecting. Outside, in the diner, I saw them bring him out. It's a beautiful thing to see a man who lives for optics get the worst photo op of his life. Chad was walked out the front doors, his hands cuffed behind his back, his vest looking suddenly ridiculous. He looked toward the diner. I don't know if he saw me. The tint on the windows was dark, but I raised my coffee cup anyway. Cheers, Chad, I said. How's that for pivot? The fallout was swift, brutal, and thoroughly documented in the trade press. PharmaCorp's stock dropped 64% by market close on Friday. By Monday, they were delisted from the exchange. The FDA doesn't play around. They pulled the manufacturing license entirely. The plant is currently dark, a metal skeleton sitting in the Indiana cornfields. Chad is currently out on bail, facing 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to violate the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. His LinkedIn profile now says open to work, which is the funniest joke he's ever told. As for me, I didn't have to look for a job. The job came to me. On Tuesday, I got a call from BioVance, our biggest competitor across town. Their VP of Quality, a woman named Alina who wears pearls and scares people for a living, invited me to lunch. We heard what happened, Alina said, cutting into her steak. We heard you let them hang themselves. I just followed the procedure, I said. We need a named qualified person, she said. We respect the statutes and we respect grief. We also pay 30% more than what you were making. I started the next Monday. My new office has a window. It overlooks a garden, not a parking lot. I still have the box of stuff from my old desk. I kept the stapler. I threw away the succulent. It was dead anyway. Sometimes, late at night, I check the news. I see the lawsuits piling up against PharmaCorp. I see the angry comments from investors. And I think about my dad. He was a mess. He was chaotic, but he taught me one thing, even if he didn't mean to. If you're going to break the rules, you better be ready to pay the price. Chad thought the rules were for little people. He thought he could innovate his way out of a federal statute. He forgot that the regulations are written in ink, but they are enforced in iron. I'm Holly Miller. I am a named qualified person. My signature is worth millions, and my silence is expensive. So to anyone out there dealing with a boss who thinks they're a visionary because they read a biography of Elon Musk, document everything. Save your emails, know your worth, and never, ever let them see you cry. Just wait for them to load the truck and then call the marshals. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a batch to release. And this time, the paperwork is immaculate.